The message came in at 11:42 p.m., 4 nights after my grandfather passed away. A blocked number. No greeting. Just a voicemail from my mother's voice, sharp and cold. If you've ever had your truth buried so deep it took grief to dig it out, please subscribe to this channel for more of such stories. You're not welcome at the funeral. The family has made a decision. No explanation. No discussion. Just a sentence that hit like the final slap in a lifetime of subtle bruises. I sat in the dark with the phone still in my hand, blinking back the kind of tears that feel more like rage than sadness. I had been my grandfather's shadow for most of my childhood. He taught me how to read, to cook, to grow tomatoes in the backyard. When I had nightmares, it was his voice on the other end of the line. But now, in the hour of his death, I was being erased by the woman who gave me life and spent most of it trying to convince me I didn't deserve it. The part that gutted me the most wasn't even her banishment. It was the fact that she knew exactly what she was taking. My goodbye. My closure. The last tie I had to someone who saw me clearly and loved me anyway. And still, I didn't scream. I didn't call back. I didn't beg. Instead, I sat down, opened a folder on my laptop, and titled a new document. Things that were never true. This wasn't the first betrayal, just the boldest. The truth is, my mother had been erasing me for years. But she did it like an artist, not a tyrant. Soft gaslighting. Subtle lies. Poison whispered with a kind smile into the ears of cousins, aunts, even my own grandmother. She's sensitive. She's always been a little unstable. She's struggling. Best not to overwhelm her. When I found out she'd been telling the family I'd abandoned my kids, while she occasionally waved at them from her driveway, it all clicked. She wasn't confused. She wasn't aging. She was orchestrating, setting the stage, making the world believe her version before I had the chance to speak mine. So when I started noticing family pulling away, I assumed I was imagining it. A missed text here, a delayed reply there. Politeness where warmth used to live. And when I finally reached out to explain what was happening, when I tried to tell them what she was doing, they looked at me with the pity you give someone who's lost their grip on reality. That's when I stopped calling. That's when I learned the most dangerous thing my mother ever taught me was to question my own voice. The funeral came and went. I saw photos on Facebook, filtered smiles and generic captions. My name was not tagged. My grandfather's legacy was wrapped in speeches I wasn't allowed to hear. But grief has a strange way of clearing fog. And in the days that followed, I wasn't paralyzed. I was planning. I made a decision that night, not to punish her, but to tell the truth. And not in a voicemail, or a dinner table plea, or a series of frantic texts that would never be answered. I would build something so undeniable, so calmly devastating, that even she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. I wouldn't shout. I would publish. I didn't know what I was writing at first. It started as a list, half rant, half obituary for the version of myself my mother spent years feeding to our family like fiction. I wrote in bursts. Not elegant, not careful. Just raw. Line after line of what I couldn't say when I was still trying to earn their belief. I never abandoned my kids. You stood on the sidewalk, waved for a minute, and told them I was too busy to say hello. I don't have a mental illness. You told the family I was unstable because I refused to let you pick up my children from school without asking me first. You said I was unpredictable, but you never mentioned how predictable your cruelty was. Every memory bled into the next. The way she twisted stories in her favor, crying on cue when anyone questioned her. The way she'd accuse me of drama if I expressed pain. And the worst part, the way people believed her because she did it so gently. My mother didn't scream. She eroded. She softened your resistance by painting you as fragile, dramatic, broken, until you believed you were. I organized the document, cleaned it, shaped it. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. The truth is louder when it's quiet. The story was universal enough to resonate, but specific enough to wound. When I reached out to a blog I admired, the editor responded the same day. "This shook me," she wrote. "It's like you were writing my story." It went live 2 weeks later under a pseudonym, Daughter of a Ghost. I expected maybe a few comments, some small circle of support. But it exploded. Readers flooded the comments. This was my mother. I thought I was the only one. The line about not shouting but publishing? I've never felt more seen. Then came the reposts, podcasts, requests to interview the anonymous author, therapists sharing it with clients, survivors sharing it with families who never listened. Within a month, the piece reached over 2 million views. And every single one of them was a nail in the coffin of the fiction my mother had built about me. I watched from the sidelines, silent, steady, as the family tried to process what was happening. A cousin emailed me, then another. The messages were cautious, curious. "Is this you?" I didn't know. I wish I had reached out. I think I believed some things I shouldn't have. I didn't answer. Not yet. They weren't ready for the real conversation. Not until they sat with what it felt like to believe a lie long enough to forget who the truth belonged to. And my mother? She posted some cryptic Facebook status about ungrateful children and imagined slights. No one reacted. No one shared it. She was shouting into the same silence she once made for me. The publisher emailed again. A book deal was on the table. They wanted a memoir. My terms. My words. My life, unredacted. And this time, I wouldn't be anonymous. She always needed a stage. Whether it was Sunday brunch or a hospital waiting room, my mother had perfected the role of the soft-spoken martyr. Exhausted by her daughter's moods, bewildered by her episodes, yet always smiling bravely through the weight of it all. She'd cry just enough to stay sympathetic, but never enough to look unstable. It was her craft. And the family? They applauded like they'd paid for front-row seats. But now her theater was empty. The blog post, my post, had gone viral. The memoir was coming. And for once, her silence couldn't be sculpted into innocence. The comments alone told the world everything I'd endured in private. She couldn't compete with a truth that echoed across millions of screens. She tried to post vague counters online, mentions of family betrayal and fiction passed off as memoir, but no one engaged. No one took the bait. People had read my words. They felt them. And even without her name, they knew who she was. The real blow came when my grandmother reached out. Not with anger. Not even confusion. With heartbreak. Her letter was handwritten, trembling loops and lines, ink blotches at the edge of some paragraphs. She told me she was sorry, that she should have asked more questions, that my mother told everyone I was fragile and needed space, but she never imagined space meant excommunication. She'd read the blog. She recognized the stories. And for the first time, she saw how carefully she'd been managed, too. I thought she was protecting you. I didn't realize she was protecting herself. I cried reading that. Not because it healed anything, but because it proved what I'd always known. The truth doesn't shout. It waits. And then it floods. The publisher finalized the book deal. I signed the contract with a name I hadn't spoken aloud in over a year, my own. The cover was stark. No face. No family photo. Just the title. The silence she gave me a memoir of family, fiction, and becoming my own witness. They launched the announcement on social media. Within hours, it trended. People pieced the puzzle together fast. Articles circulated. Anonymous blogger behind viral post to publish memoir. Quiet daughter speaks out. Millions listen. The story was picked up by major networks. And finally, people from my past, friends, old coworkers, even my brother, started reaching out. But not her. She stayed quiet. Because she'd finally realized that she couldn't control the narrative anymore. The stage was no longer hers. Word got around that she stopped attending family dinners. She refused to answer questions when others brought up the book. Some distant relatives who had once ignored me were now whispering about how quiet she's been lately. That was the beginning of her unraveling. Without an audience, my mother lost the rhythm of her performance. Without her supporting cast, she couldn't keep the script straight. The woman who once orchestrated sympathy like a symphony now sat alone at a table where no one asked for her version. She had turned me into a ghost. Now she was the one fading. The silence after the storm was the part one hadn't prepared for. Not hers. Theirs. The family who stood behind her, stone-faced, arms crossed, watching my name disappear from invitations and holiday cards like it had always been optional. They weren't cruel. They were polite. Which, in a family like mine, was its own brand of violence. They didn't yell. They didn't insult. They just quietly believed the worst without ever asking me if it was true. Now, they were the ones unsure of what to say. Some of them sent long, halting messages. I didn't know what to believe. She said you needed space. I never meant to hurt you. Others just liked a few posts on social media, as if clicking a heart on my success might erase the years they disappeared during my pain. And then there were the ones who said nothing. Not an apology. Not a question. Not a sound.
The book was out now.
Bookstores stocked it in displays. Book clubs named it their pick of the month. Teachers emailed to say they were assigning chapters in trauma and psychology courses. I was being interviewed on podcasts, asked to speak at conferences, featured in magazines. But the people who once said I was too sensitive still wouldn't look me in the eye. They were stuck between two worlds. The old one where I was a silent daughter, and the new one where I didn't need them to hear me in order to speak. I wasn't writing to punish them. I wasn't even writing for closure. I was writing for every person who needed to know that being cast as the villain in someone else's script didn't mean you had to play the part. But there was one moment, one memory, that stayed with me like a splinter under skin. My uncle. The one who used to call me champ. The one who never showed up when I begged the family to listen. He showed up at my first in-person reading. I spotted him in the back, arms folded, expression unreadable. When it ended, I waited for him to leave like the others. But he didn't. He walked up, held the book in his hands, and said, "She told us you were gone, that you'd lost it. But I read this, and it's the most clear-headed thing I've ever seen." He didn't apologize. But he looked like someone who had realized his silence had a price. My mother didn't reach out. Not once. Not when the book was announced. Not when my name was published. Not even when distant relatives began to cut her off, one by one. The same woman who had once convinced a family I was unwell now had no one left to lie to. She had built a kingdom out of sympathy, and I had quietly starved it of attention. Now it was crumbling. I didn't attend the book launch party to be celebrated. I went to remind myself that I wasn't invisible anymore. There were flowers and flash photography, clinking glasses and soft jazz, and a room full of strangers who felt like old friends, readers who had cried with me through printed pages and found pieces of their pain inside mine. Some had driven hours to be there. They lined up, books in hand, and thanked me for putting words to what they'd only ever whispered in therapy. And yet, somewhere in that crowd, I kept looking for the faces that would never come. Not out of hope, out of habit. That's the part of estrangement no one talks about. Not the rage, not the loss, the reflex, the ache in your chest that flinches when someone laughs like your sister or brushes past in your mother's perfume. The part of you that still wants to be believed, even after you've stopped needing it. I left the event early. Took a cab back to the quiet house I now called home. The one with no shared keys. No framed photos of people who disappeared when I needed them. Just me, a kettle, a stack of dog-eared paperbacks, and silence I had finally made my own. That night, I wrote a final letter. Not for publishing, not for posting, just for peace. I addressed it to myself, the version of me that stayed too long. The girl who bent into apology-shaped knots trying to be understood by people who preferred her muted. You were never broken. You were edited. And the day you stopped explaining yourself was the day you started writing the story that saved your life. I folded the letter, slipped it into the back of my copy of the book. The only goodbye I would ever give, and the only one that mattered. My mother never publicly acknowledged the book. Not once. Not even when neighbors stopped speaking to her. Not when her church quietly replaced her role on the outreach committee. Not when my name began to appear in articles she could no longer ignore. But I heard through a cousin that she read it. Every word. That she cried while pretending not to. That she tried to convince herself it wasn't about her. That she kept the book hidden in her dresser drawer, under old scarves she never wore anymore. She may never admit what she did. But now, she wakes up every day in a world where the story she tried to erase is a permanent record. One she cannot rewrite. One everyone else now knows. That is my justice. Not vengeance. Not destruction. Just truth.
Spoken. Published.
Echoed. The day after the launch, I visited my grandfather's grave. I sat on the grass in silence for a while. No flowers. No speech. Just a woman who was no longer carrying the weight of pretending. Before I left, I whispered, "They took you from me, but I found a way back." And for the first time in years, I walked away without looking over my shoulder. Sometimes the people who silenced you the longest don't deserve your final words. Please subscribe to this channel for more of such stories.